Hi, everybody. Here from my home with Matthew Smith, the Executive Director of the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud in your home. And speaking of working from home, Matthew, I want to talk about the impacts that are happening with insurance carriers. What happens when an entire SIU department starts working from home unexpectedly and immediately?
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's great to be with you today. And the first answer is amazing. When you think back,
Here.
if we would have had this dialogue in January or early February of 2020, and we would have said, within the next 6 weeks, every major SIU operation in America will no longer be housed in an office tower or an office park and will be operating 100% out of basements, family rooms, dining rooms, home offices, everybody watching would have thought we were crazy. But the insurance industry did it. And kudos to you that you all pulled it off and within a matter of weeks had established SIUs working 100% remotely. And most carriers are continuing to do that. So what did we learn? We learned new ways to conduct investigations because we could no longer go out into the field. We could no longer do one-on-one interviews. So like we're doing, whether it's Zoom, GoToMeeting, new ways to interview, ways to ask claimants to submit photographs of where injuries occurred, new ways interacting with law enforcement, because for a time period in some states, law enforcement was not even responding to non-injury accidents. So we had to document auto accidents differently. So we could talk about it for the next hour, we won't, but certainly the whole concept of going from traditional SIU investigations to remote operations has been one of the real hallmarks and achievements of fraud fighters in the year 2020.
It's spurred some real innovation, that's for sure. What about some of the impacts? Everybody's got their own theories on this. What are one or two impacts that you see as a long tail effect from COVID, maybe that aren't so good for the industry?
Well, let me break it out by agreeing with the first part of what you said, which is I'm glad you're focusing on the long tail, because this too shall pass. There will be a point where COVID-19 fades a little bit into the distance and we start looking at it in the rearview mirror. Where I might slightly disagree is that are bad or high risk to the industry, and the industry being insurers. There's always change in the world of insurance. But let's talk about what are probably the two largest long-term impacts that fraud fighters are going to have to be aware of, recognize, and come up with new ways to identify and fight fraud within. And I think when you do that, there are two huge long-term impacts that COVID's going to bring. One is defining the workplace. So what is a workers' compensation injury? We're not going to see, I don't think, at any time in the future, an immediate return to everybody going back to offices. Don't think that's going to happen. We're going to have more remote workers in our workplace. So what's the actual practical application? I'm working from my home right now. If I get up and I go to get a cup of coffee because I don't have the office canteen to go to, I'm going to my kitchen, but I trip over the rug and I'm on work time. Is that a workers' comp injury? So we're completely redefining what is the workplace and how do we investigate that workplace when it's not a commercial establishment as to whether or not the claim is legitimate or fraudulent. The other long-term impact is going to be something we addressed back in July with another major webinar that we did this year, but we're not the only ones, and that's the world of telemedicine and telehealth. We thought that we had 10 years. Most health insurers, most property and casualty insurers thought we were on about a 10-year ramp up to the real use of telehealth in America. What we found was that it turned into about 10 weeks. And it too is not going to go away. And there's many, many consumer advantages, especially for our older citizens, to using telemedicine, but we're going to have to figure out new ways to investigate, document, and determine what is legitimate and what is fraudulent. So we're looking at it, looking not just 2020, but looking 5-10 years out. These are going to be the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on the world of insurance fraud.
Feels like telehealth and telemedicine just turned on overnight. And I can see, having worked in healthcare for some time, you really see there's going to be ways that it can be exploited both from the patient and from the provider, and really just kind of waiting to see the major impacts of that. So we'll keep a lookout for it. Last thing I want to ask you today is, insurance is one of those things you pay for and you hope you never need it, right? And unfortunately, sometimes people get the perception I've been paying for something for so long, I never get anything out of it, right? And maybe there's a little bit of resentment there. Of course, that's what it's designed for. You hope you never need it. But COVID really shined a light on this for some people, especially businesses who had major, major impacts. How is the perception changing there? Are we starting to see some impacts as it relates to fraud with sort of that resentment or maybe trying to get back for some of these exclusions that were, things not covered for COVID?
Oh, absolutely. And I certainly didn't make up this saying, but what I've said for years, insurance is the biggest waste of money until the time you need it.
Right.
When that car gets wrecked or that home burns or you're injured, then you want it.
Right.
But we see issues that arise out of coverage. And one of the things that the coalition is very concerned about, and having spent 35 years as an insurance litigator and written many, many coverage analysis, I understand the concept of coverage behind the pandemic exclusions. And we don't have time to go into those today. But if the policies are well written, right, wrong, or indifferent, those exclusions are probably going to be valid and upheld by the courts. But before insurers jump up and down and say, hey, great, we won, our exclusion was upheld, there needs to be some pretty serious thought given to the implications of that. And what we're concerned about is the average consumer doesn't understand the intricacies of insurance policy language and especially exclusions. All they know is mom and pop businesses, people that invested their life savings in restaurants were denied coverage by insurance companies.
Right.
There could be a long-term backlash to that. What do I refer to? Well, one of the things we study is what motivates people to commit insurance fraud. How do they justify it? And even honest people normally will commit insurance fraud if they can justify in their mind that what they're doing really isn't wrong. So when you have not only fraudsters, but people who are on the bubble, sitting there with a legitimate claim, or deciding from an automobile accident, well, my neck hurts a little bit, but am I going to make a claim and run up a bunch of bills, or am I just going to live with it? When they look and say, I remember back in COVID-19, and the insurance companies didn't treat their insureds right. This is my opportunity to even the scorecard.
Yep.
Or they have a legitimate claim, say it's a water loss or a fire loss, but all of a sudden now they inflate the contents.
Right.
And they say, well, if I don't do that, the insurance company is going to turn around and the insurance company is going to try to deny me coverage or lowball my payment. So I have to inflate my claim simply to try to get an equal footing with the insurance company. Yeah. So those are the potential, and we stress potential, but those are the things we're looking at from the coalition as to potential factors that may cause a spike down the road in insurance fraud. And all we're encouraging insurance companies to do, not to change your coverage analysis, but to be aware and support your SIU teams. Give them the additional resourcing, staffing, dollars that they need to put an effective guard up against a potential rise of insurance fraud.
You go back to the insurance fraud triangle, right? You've got the pressure, the rationalization, the opportunity. The pressure is on now, right? People are losing their jobs, they're losing their businesses, they're being shut down. The rationalization, exactly what you just talked about, right? I've been paying all this time, they've done nothing for me. So it's really, in my opinion, very hard to control those two things. It's that opportunity, right? We got to close the door and make it as hard as we possibly can for people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. At the same time, supporting the honest insurance that we all want.
Absolutely. You say it very well.
Oh, appreciate it, Matthew. Always really insightful to talk to you. Love working together with you in the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks again for all the support we at the Coalition received from FRISS and from your team. You're a valuable part of our coalition.